First, it'll be an affinity grouping on incidences of aversion to learning that you've seen, like either yourself or other people, and when they avoid, they have some seeming aversion to learning. So a couple examples for me would be in the past, I've seen, I've had a number of coworkers and colleagues, students that I've worked with, and they basically shy away from new learning opportunities. So I've seen instances where somebody who's been working at a company for the longest time works very, very hard, but never wants to go outside of their comfort zone and continuously shies away from learning new things. I think that leads to things like people saying they don't want to go beyond a certain technology, or they're worried about certain issues with adapting new technologies and so on. And then there's kind of the opposite of that, where it's just laziness. There's, they may learn quickly, they may have no problem learning new things, but they have no drive to actually learn anything new. And so I kind of want to discuss this, and then discuss theories around creating motivation in groups of people, in yourself, in teams, and motivating other people. And I hope that we can kind of all gain from that. So if everyone wants to write down a few things that they...
pen over there in the box?
There aren't any pens over here.
Does everybody have a pen they can write with?
Let's see, I got a few here, but they're part of the organization materials if anybody needs one.
Are we writing down possible causes of aversion? Or specific
I think
instances?
example situations. Okay. So, I mean, for like my big one is, I have a coworker and they absolutely do not want to move outside of their comfort zone. They've, for example, if somebody's been using classic ASP for 10 years now, and they don't want to move to the .NET framework. They don't even want to move outside of the ASP 1.1 or anything like that. So there's this idea of just not moving forward, and then that person being left behind, and kind of if that causes damage to the team or something along those lines. So if you have ideas around situations that you've seen where learning new things just became just became too much of a problem to move forward. I think that's what I'm looking for. Cool. So you can just walk up and post them on the board over here. My name's Chris Lucian, and I'm from Hunter Industries in San Diego, San Marcos. And we do the mob programming thing there. So if you guys heard of mob programming, so I like affinity groupings because that's kind of part of our constant retrospection and things like that. So that's a little bit of my background.
Did you say you're from Lake San Marcos?
No, from San Marcos.
Oh, okay.
In San Diego.
Yeah.
So you're looking for reasons on?
I'm looking for situations in which people avoid learning. So, yeah. Feel free to continue coming up here, and we can continue going through these. So, first one here is I don't have time to learn learn that and get my job done. So that's kind of the, like, you know, a little bit of a working too hard. And you can bring it up, because I mean, that's the whole idea of affinity grouping. If you have the same idea, then, you know.
Look through the list and see how many are the same.
Yeah, well, I want to read through these, and the idea is to create, you know, clusters of information in a certain way. So I'm kind of classifying that as working so hard that that learning has become impossible, essentially. You know, it's almost like if you push a button every day, kind of like Lost. You know, the main character was like so stressed out about pushing this button every day that you know, he didn't find a way to go off and have somebody else do it, or something along those lines, right? So that's like the working too hard. I have my job, but I don't want to be responsible for that. And so that's kind of the almost like a disinterested perspective, or too busy to continue working. So that's a little bit, it's close to here, but not terribly far away.
That one's sort of more along the lines of the if I learn something new, I'll then be responsible for that on top of what I'm already doing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's an exceeding amount of work, and you just can't move forward.
Which is the same as
Math is hard. So there's that one too. It's the I can't learn this, but and that's why I'm going to completely avoid it. I don't want to go forward. I just want to sit in my happy little world. Even though the company's kind of moving forward without me, so I'll just put that here for now. Fear of failure. I can't learn it. I won't be good at it. So that's kind of in the same category. I would say as math is hard. We can start here. Lack of curiosity. I think it kind of falls under a little bit under the laziness idea. There's no desire to kind of go forward. Not necessarily lazy, but I guess that's lack of motivation. There's no kind of moving forward. Is there anything you want to add to that? Okay, so right here. Let's see. New thing won't be accepted, and I'll look/feel foolish. So that's kind of like from the other perspective. That's kind of the organization kind of beating down on you. So I'm not getting much of a grouping yet, too much. Conflict of time between work and time to learn. So that's kind of the same place right there. With the too busy to kind of move forward. Someone claims to want to learn about something, but shows no action or no incentives towards it. So it kind of goes a little bit with the lack of curiosity. You're kind of stalling. See, being open to learning sends a message that I'm not the expert. So that's kind of in the fear category down here, a little bit. Fear of failure, and kind of fear of being ridiculed, I guess. Avoiding learning to avoid responsibility. So that kind of fits with the I will be responsible for it as well, right here. That kind of, that section. Coworker complained there's not enough time to learn, kind of thing. Yeah. So that is under the conflict of time, right in there. And I'm going to move this up here. Had a team that would only use Microsoft technologies, refused to use open source tools. So that's kind of the organizational standpoint as well. Let's get bigger spaces between these.
You want to be there?
With the times.
You want to sit there?
Learning. we have the modding. Let's put that under Microsoft Technologies. Let's see, takes way too long to come up to speed and be useful with new technologies and tools. So that's the lack of time again. I do my job for the money, and I learn outside the job. And so, kind of, do we need to redefine what your job is? I guess is let's see. So that is kind of be afraid to move forward type of thing. Stay away from all. And it took forever. So that goes along with the time. Don't have time, don't have time, don't have time. I'm busy doing my job, can't bug me. That's another good one. Too many things on work to do. No time outside of work. So that's kind of under the organizational stuff. That's not my realm. It's not my job. They're kind of avoiding responsibilities again in there. I don't want to get pigeonholed into the new technology. Can't read it a little bit, but I like what you do. Don't want to change. And so kind of don't want to change, pigeonholed. That's not my realm. Kind of fits in that category right there. Don't see relevance of this theory stuff. So why are we trying to improve? Why are we trying to? So that is, again, is this from the perspective of a manager or from a developer?
From a student learning, it's like, well, what is this like relational query thing actually do?
Relevance, understanding of relevance. Okay, so that's kind of on its own here for now. So that's good. I already know X, so why am I replacing my technology with something else? And so let's see. Good specialization. Knowledge and pigeonhole. These kind of go together with this. So I already know X is I can learn outside my job, and that's kind of like the indifference category here. Don't see the relevance of this theory stuff. Yeah, put that over there. Video games, procrastination, so you don't want to learn at home, kind of thing. So that's also good. It's kind of outside of the office learning and things like that. Maybe sticky notes, extra sticky. Learning new infrastructure. I don't want new networking tools, just the development environment. So that's kind of like you're being imposed upon by your infrastructure group. Is that what, am I getting that correct?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's kind of like organizational issues from that standpoint. The things I want to learn are completely outside my job and company. The things that I do want to learn are completely outside of my job. Okay, so that is kind of also on the organizational standpoint. So what we kind of have here is, let's see. Teammate who refuses to try working on trunk and doing the continuous integration and true continuous integration. So that's a team member who doesn't want to actually use source control. Is that kind of?
No, he wants to use branch for everything and doesn't want to do CI.
Oh, okay. I got
So
you.
he's refusing to do an agile process that everybody else is adopting.
Yeah. Okay. So we have kind of more organizational problems.
Oh, it's not an organizational
Personal.
The whole organization is adopting it except him.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of another thing is like, where do you kind of draw the line? Where do the managers draw kind of have to reevaluate what's going on. But yeah, that's good too. I'll give you a little bit of history on myself. So we kind of have these groups of, this is like way too much time doing something, I can't really do anything outside of that. Don't bother me because I'm doing my job. I'm literally taking the logs and putting them to make the house, and there's so much that I do, and I have no time to improve what I do, so I cannot move forward with what I want to be doing, or what I should be doing, or creating a better efficiency for myself. That's kind of this idea right here. Then we kind of go to the video games procrastination. That's kind of that's pretty obvious. It's just it kind of goes with indifference, really, but indifference in a little bit of a different way. And so I want to talk about scenarios where we can kind of pull away from that. I don't see the relevance of this theory stuff, so I think within an organization, within a school, or any situation, I do think that there should be a way of communicating kind of the relevance of something, or if you're attempting to expand your team's capabilities by moving forward, you want to essentially be able to communicate that you're just trying to explore new things and kind of move forward. So I'm going to kind of leave that in its own category because I want to talk about that individually. We have a teammate who refuses to work on the trunk. So there is also the idea that there is some sort of structure on the organization. If I've kind of worked in these situations, I have worked with people that work outside of even source control and try and check in things and overwrite stuff, and it's very unpleasant. And so if they're incapable of doing these things and they don't learn from examples, then that's kind of also a special case, so I'll leave that off to the side. Learning new infrastructure, some people won't work will work on different teams because of specialization. So how do we bring people out of their comfort zones, or in an organization, how do you convince the people above and below you to kind of move forward with these ideas? I think a lot of it does have to do with kind of showing results and bringing stuff forward. And so I think from an organizational standpoint, there does need to be specialized time for learning. What we do at Hunter is we have an hour of every day dedicated to learning. So all the developers spend an hour in the morning doing specific learning exercises. If we're working on something during the day and we realize as a group that somebody has a deficiency in a certain piece of technology, or we need to move forward on something that's taking us too long, we do focus on those things first. We also have homework, and then we have a Friday learning session, which is an hour and a half on top of the existing hour on Friday. And I think that kind of creates slack for people to grow, but I'll get to that in a second. Then we have I already know X, math is too hard. It's kind of indifference towards learning, and so how do you motivate people? So we have a couple of problems here. It's not enough slack in the organization. The organization doesn't have an open enough idea about where developers should put their time, how integration should work between teams, how to decouple dependencies of teams from one another, and things like that. So I kind of want to go through and explain my team's way of approaching these topics. And then finally, the kind of fear of failure and indifference. So did anybody go to the mobbing talk ever? Okay, so what we do is my whole team does, all of our developers, 4 developers currently, at one computer to a computer. And we have two projectors representing the dual screen monitor. We have 2 sets of keyboards, one for left hand, one for right hand, with ergonomic adjustments for whoever's sitting there. And what we do is kind of a driver-navigator scenario, but it's 3 navigators essentially and 1 driver, and then the driver switches every 15 minutes. And so this kind of promotes learning within the group, but we didn't get there right away. And so there was this initial kind of start that we had. And so this kind of indifference to learning is what I can address first with how we first started this thing. So when I hired on with them, Woody Zuhl had just been hired there, and he had started kind of coaxing pair programming out of the developers there. All the developers worked alone, single cubicles, completely waterfall, completely based off documentation. And so what he had done was essentially this kind of leading by example. And so I think this is the approach that we need to take to kind of coax people out of their learning, their indifference to learning. And so say they have the time to learn, but they don't have the desire to learn. I think that is a really important thing to get. And so we have had we had a developer at that time that completely waterfall. He's been through a number of different managers because he's worked there for so many years, and so he was kind of just in the mentality of, I'm just going to write things out. And then he'll get fired, and a new manager will hire on, and then we'll go ahead and continue living life as it is. And so he was kind of against the whole thing. So the approach that Woody had taken with him is to kind of lead by example. And so kind of what had happened is he had just started doing like, saying, hey, I need help. Can you help me on this? And so that's how he kind of got him to pair without saying he's pairing. And furthermore, he just kind of created situations where they would do randoris on Friday, and essentially said, you don't have to touch the keyboard during the randori. Just if you want to participate, you can participate. If not, you don't have to. So then after that, and he didn't want to touch the keyboard. He didn't want to be part of the randori or anything. He just kind of worked on his own thing, and that's kind of like that. I have my own job. I don't want to go outside the box and indifferent from the learning. And so after I was hired on, I got a project, and I was surprised to learn that they weren't doing any pairing there. And because I know Woody so well, and I was thinking, well, surely Woody would be pairing his organization. I'm surprised that he's not. But it turned out that he was just handed this team. And so what had happened is I had taken up a project, and I also just kind of worked on it alone, and I approached it in a very agile way. I had constant communication with the customers, and frequent releases, and frequent feedback, and we got it out very quickly. And so then he had seen that, and I think this developer had seen kind of the way that things could be, and then right around that moment was a kind of transition where he started kind of participating in those randoris and agreed to pair more often and things like that. So I think that there is this kind of notion that if you can show somebody kind of an aha moment to kind of move them out of their indifference, it's really important. And so that actually worked very successfully for us, because then we kind of moved forward, and we had another developer kind of asked to go over code on a project that was stalled. And so that stalled project then kind of turned into our mobbing practices. And so the mobbing, being that we had gone into a room together, and a conference room, and we had scheduled it for a couple hours, and we started refactoring the project. And as we refactored, we kind of found this nice kind of cohesive way of working on our work, and in a randori fashion, and it ended up being very, very fast and useful. So kind of back to the I don't have time to work on this stuff. So does that kind of cover the indifference? Are there any questions about kind of what I had talked about there? So going to the I'm busy doing my job, don't bug me, and kind of we're working too hard. I think from an organizational standpoint, companies and people need to allow themselves slack to learn. And so that's the idea within our company. We have a bit of slack to learn with, and I think that we could use more than an hour a day on learning. And the reason I say that is because you can code up something, and you can, so let's say that you have made a page, a simple page kind of every day for a website, and you get another project that's very similar, and you keep making a page, and another page, and another page. What kind of happens is you get these patterns kind of forming, and but they can't really be abstracted out to because they're two different projects, and they might take a turn in one direction or another very quickly. Our kind of solution to that, because we have a lot of projects we maintain, and currently we're maintaining 36 projects, and we went from no releases a year to having 20 releases in the last year, no bugs in production code, and we've been very effective in our work. And so what we've done is created a generator for a lot of the code that we do. And we use the .NET, Microsoft MVC framework, but you can use anything you want. But the main idea is that they have the idea of controllers and actions, and then those actions supply pages, and then those views. And we were able to generate a new project fully under unit test with approval tests. So if you ever heard of Lucian, those unit approval tests, those are also very, very useful tools. And we have taken that, and we can generate out any portion of that. So if we want a kind of new CRUD operation, we can push it out fully under test, and we can continue to modify it from there. And the reason I kind of bring attention to that is because we get far more work done now than if we would have doing it individually. And so since we've been in a mob, and we've had 4 people to a computer at a time, wasting any time becomes waste of 4 people's time, not just your own. So with that, creating the generator and creating new ways of kind of speeding up your work has become very important, because you now need to save everyone's time, but not only that, everybody's kind of looking at it from a new perspective to where you can continue forward and make your work faster. So then that kind of leads me to not even having to worry about the infrastructure problem, right? If your organization will allow you to do this sort of thing. So as Woody says, I'm not saying that you should use this process, but we kind of came to this naturally. And I think that these problems can be solved in a natural manner if you kind of drive toward working in a kind of agile manner, if that makes sense to everyone. Now, any questions on any of that? All right. Okay, so what I wanted to just drive home here is that there should be a balance between the ability to learn, like Slack, and work. And that means that when the whole team is learning, you'll kind of drag everyone with you. Essentially, people will kind of learn by example, lead. You'll lead by example, and then they would more or less follow. And if they're not following, if they're completely refusing to do these practices, then essentially, like with the branching, that if they're locked out of doing any development in branches, then they potentially could be more willing to do that sort of thing. So there is this idea of kind of being the center of attention, and then moving forward as the center of attention, you will not, the outliers will kind of come and flow along with the rest of the group. And so that is the idea. It has worked for us, and it's kind of just that approach has helped us get to that point and kind of get past these issues. Let's see.
I guess when I look at some of the issues that you have up there,
Yeah.
a lot of them boil down to motivation, trying to find the motivation to get that person moving forward. But there are also other areas in environmental factors, things that are keeping people from learning. The person that
Yeah.
says, I've got to do my job, I don't have time for this, there may be situations where they really don't have time for it because they're gonna have to go back and make up that time after learning and catch up on their work.
So can they be learning to do their job faster? What is it that somebody can work on so much that they can't improve by the speed of while they're working is my question. Because I mean, from our perspective, any repetitive tasks that we had done we had come up with a number of ways to improve that process and speed it up. And I would venture to say that if they spent half their time every day working on faster ways to do the work that they're doing, then they would move faster. And that can only be proven in that particular person's case, but it's worked every time I've looked at it in that perspective. And so I think that there are a lot of ways that we can take a look at certain situations like this and inject this idea that, you know, can they begin generating code? Can they begin introducing a intelligent approach, an artificial intelligence solution? Can they introduce a solution that like, for example, putting in unit tests? Putting in unit tests or doing test-driven development may seem like a huge front-end load, and it may seem like, hey, that's just going to cost us a lot of time if we're writing our code correctly anyway. I mean, it's the same old argument, and we are all kind of hopefully using unit tests in our work.
I'm just getting a little confused about maybe, this sounds more like aversions to change versus aversions to learning, and I'm just wondering what specifically is about, you know, where's the line?
Yeah.
Because you know, when I was working at a big company and I had, you know, stuff like that, the thing that angered me was having to learn something new, even though there was no value add to me. You know, in anything that I was doing, because it was something everybody was supposed to learn how to do, even though I didn't actually have to do it. So when there was no value add. So there's a difference between that and changing the way you're doing something.
Mm-hmm. So when is it that we are actively learning a new approach at our work that makes it faster, that it has no value? I think that's the main question, because if I'm sitting there and saying, oh, everybody has to do unit tests, and everybody kind of looks at you like, oh, whatever, I need to get my work done, I need to continue forward. And it's not going, so I've heard the argument that unit tests are just a waste of my time, I don't even need to learn how to do unit tests because I write great code, right? That it may be perceived that they're not getting any value from making that movement, and there could be bad changes. There could be somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about saying, hey, you're all gonna do this now. But
I guess my point is, though, specifically about unit tests, I would agree with you, but I'm talking in general. If we're talking in general about change and aversion to learning, and not just this specific case.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, then we have different, because I'm trying to take what we're talking about here and apply it outside of the room, right?
Yeah,
So what can we learn here that we can apply elsewhere?
Sure.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. So in this kind of case, you know, where there isn't something that isn't particularly going to be useful to somebody, and yet they're told they have to do it.
Yeah,
How do we encourage people or motivate? I don't think we
such
can
things.
motivate them to do that.
I would think in that instance, your examples, I think, come from an organization, a utopian
Yeah.
organization.
Like you get time to learn?
That's
Yeah.
kind of
That's
top,
a dream.
but it's great that it's
Yeah.
but it's very top down, like we're all on board, now the
Yeah.
individuals get on board.
Sure.
Whereas my organization, a very large organization, this change, I work with change management.
Yeah.
And from the program or project perspective, you try to implement change down to the individual. And you run up against a lot of these like motivation, but there are also things like where you're saying something doesn't apply to me.
Right.
You also are the middle person having to talk back up the chain saying, why are we putting these guys
Yeah.
through something that, you know what I mean? You're kind of,
And so that's the finding of, you need to find metrics, communicate up your organizational chain that,
So some of the
essentially
aversions to learning are
yeah.
valid,
Yeah.
and it's educating.
That's what my point is, it's so contextual. you know,
Sure.
When we
sure.
talk about that.
Yeah,
But I think that's one of the things that I do first, though, when you're looking at, people come to me with as the change manager, it's like, okay, you're in charge of the training and all of that, and so then it's like, we need them to do this. Well, the first thing you look at it and say, is that true?
Right.
And about 25% of the time, that's not the case. There's something else going on. It's environmental, or someone has read an article and decided, we're all doing this, and it's like
Yeah.
totally not what needs to be happening. So I don't know,
so is there a need for experimentation on every level? Like I would say that, kind of in my organization, it's our kind of utopian environment has come up because we had a kind of desperate upper management say, okay, we need to hire somebody, let's hire Woody because he's passionate about it.
Mhm.
Now, I would say that they probably, and strike this from the record, they probably don't know that, they don't know exactly what he's doing, but they do understand now that they do see results. And so I think that there's this kind of need for experimentation on all levels, and trying things, and I mean, that's all about agility. So I think communicating up the chain also, there needs to be at least a slight bit of support. Otherwise, you're not trusted. I would say go find a new job. If you're not trusted, then it's probably not worth staying there. Now, you could have the opposite, where you have no results for a long period of time, and you should be evaluating some new way of approach of doing something. So if you have upper management that is not evaluating a new approach of doing something continuously to try to improve things, then you're probably not going to get, I would say that you're not going to get people in an organization that will want to learn, because there's no idea of success kind of being radiated out to everyone else. Because you could see that what we had done was successful, and we kept becoming more and more successful, and that's why the upper management didn't kind of ask Woody to do other things, right? Because he is constantly looking to learn and to change. And so other parts of the company are doing things this way, where they are constantly reinventing and innovating the ways that they do things. And that's why they're very successful at what they do. But it's hard to say that if I'm in an organization, and I have been before, where it's been, managers yelling at people, trying to motivate them through fear, and, the iron fist and everything like that. You're definitely, I think from an individual standpoint, they should be looking for a new job. From if you're the owner of the business and you have management that's doing that, you should be telling them to experiment and try and find new ways to improve. And then if they're completely not improving in the way that they're doing something, change it. And if they are, then continue forward. Now, I have interacted with developers that have been upset with continuous change from the management. So you do need some successes to kind of create that happy feeling to flow down to other people. So I think that there has to be kind of this back and forth communication in an organization. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth working at. So that's it's kind of like a cop-out statement. But.
One of the issues is that as an organization, it's very large, that the change tends to start at the program level.
Yeah.
And you build it, and if it gets traction, then you can go and pitch it, and say, hey, maybe other sites should be doing this.
As long as you have the freedom to be able to gain traction, right?
Right.
So I am constantly in situations where I'm working with people who are just afraid of learning or changing anything. And my big issue is trying to get them over the first hurdle to try the first thing.
Now, is there a way that you can show them a success from some other person's point of view? Like in my example, it was we had created a successful project in a short amount of time and had and we had a very major success, which was the team's first actual release of the software, a new project in helps in creating that or synthesizing it is difficult. Is there that kind of opportunity somewhere?
I mean, I've been in all kinds of different situations, but I come in when you want to do an agile transition usually, and taking people from a traditional approach into an agile approach, where you're in a situation where like maybe none of the actual technical employees have ever done it. It's just, there's tons of fear and resistance.
Yeah. Is there support from the upper levels of?
Yeah, it's usually the management saying we have to change. And then they bring in, you know, someone to try and affect the change. And then I get the job of working with a team that may or may not be good or even competent at their jobs.
Can you seed that? I would say, can you seed that team with somebody who is an expert in that situation?
I try to, but I've been in situations where I've been unable to hire or fire, actually.
Yeah.
And I've had to get a group of 12 people, each with different issues, almost all stemming from different fears in their past, into working in agile. Right.
Yeah, and so I think that the situation, again, it's hard to pull people forward without some kind of leading example to drive them through motivation. And if you can't hire or fire, then you're stuck in a situation where you may have to kind of go in and do it yourself. Like, can you bring that to them? Can you start saying, hey, can you show me this code? Can we work on it together or something along those lines?
Well, I did all of them. They ended up being very agile, but it just took a long, long time.
Yeah.
And you know, every new place I go to, there's always people. Most recently, I've been able to actually just fire them, and now we're hiring new people. But that's rare. I mean, usually when I don't have that luxury of just.
But that's hopefully, mostly, always, never the answer to fire the person. Do you know what I mean? It's like if
Well, you work with them first, but there are some people who will jettison the entire transition by just being passive, passive-aggressive, aggressive, and like keeping your team from teaming, and then all the other team members resent them, and you just get this horrible situation. Some people you gotta let go. They're just not ever gonna get there.
I think one of the things about learning though that's different than a lot of things we do at work. Once you step into a state of learning, you're like at your most vulnerable.
Right.
Because you're showing everybody what you don't know. You're, you know, everyone thought you were the big SME, you know, here, and all of a sudden, what do you mean you don't know how to do that? People are watching what you're doing, you're answering a question wrong, you're doing, you know, it's like so vulnerable. And a lot of people, probably especially older employees who aren't, I would say younger employees are used to this kind of back and forth, like, oh, you know, constant learning piece, and older employees a lot of times are stepping into that for the first time, and it's very, and so where they may say, I don't want to do it, it's like there's something behind that, you know, kind of trying to get that out of them. I think most people appreciate when you kind of find that root thing in them and get them past it. Most people do want to learn, and they want to keep their job.
Yeah,
You know?
that's awesome. I think, you know, that, like, Randoris is kind of an interesting method to bring people to kind of expose themselves to this kind of scrutiny. But it is really hard to kind of step off the pedestal or whatever and say, hey, I really don't know how to do these things. So there's also this kind of thing of like creating a comfortable environment, and so.
Do you want to say just a few more words about Randori? Because I haven't.
Doing Randoris is kind of like you have a number, however many people, and they each sit at a keyboard at the keyboard. So you have one keyboard and kind of a projector or something so everybody can see. And every 15 minutes you switch out the navigator and the driver. And so, and then kind of no one else is allowed to talk. That's like the traditional style of doing this as an exercise. And when we've done it before, we've done like the rules to bowling. You can do, there are Google code jams that we've done. So we've done the airplane walkways and things like that. So basically you take kind of requirements that you're given, you know, one little thing at a time, and then you do a test-driven exercise and you replace the driver and the navigator we were initially doing 5 minutes in the exercises. So we would have somebody sitting on the keyboard for 5 minutes, somebody navigating them for 5 minutes, and then we switched. And I would say that that's probably a really stressful environment, so we didn't require anybody to do it. But typically the people that were kind of gung-ho for change and gung-ho for learning just jumped right in. And so then those guys are actually doing what managers want them to do now, so that everybody kind of sees by example. Those people are probably a little less likely to be afraid of exposing themselves, their flaws to other people. And so now you have somebody with a success who's successfully learning. Everybody in the room still getting at least something out of it, but what's really happening is those people that are refusing to participate typically kind of say, okay, well, I'm going to have to start doing this, or, people are going to kind of look down on me. And so that's kind of, you can engineer it in that way.
So you're creating a culture where to not learn means you fail.
Yeah. I think that's
the biggest change.
That's a very
for my teams.
evident thing in our situation, is that we do have kind of a situation where anything that somebody doesn't know kind of wastes a lot of people's time. It doesn't waste just their own time. So like typing at a keyboard, tech typing, and so somebody looking at it, you may be able to get away with that for your whole career and never have to learn how to type using touch typing. But somebody will see that right away in a brand Ori, and it may be called out, it may not, it may just be kind of like, oh man. So there's this idea, well, now, some people should probably be playing typing games or something along those lines to kind of catch up with the rest of everyone else.
And that's what you would do, you would maybe pull them aside and say that, or would the group be like?
No, he called me out in front of everyone. It was me.
It was you.
Yeah, so I mean, like, doing my own projects, and before I worked at Hunter, I was working in a queue by myself, so, I can type 3 lines of code and look up and realize I had caps lock on the whole time, and it doesn't really affect anyone but me, or no one else knows.
Right.
But when you're doing it, when you have, 4 or 5 other people watching, then it's like, hey, you should work on learning, touch type. I mean, he wasn't like,
But so how was that experience? Was it a pretty supportive experience? They were like,
yeah, I mean, it was something I always knew that I should do, but I just didn't.
It was
And
really good support of that.
yeah, so, I mean, yeah, it
So
was.
it sounds to me like this is motivation by embarrassment.
Yeah, it's.
Well, I'm
No,
not
it's-
suggesting, because we have a very comfortable relationship with everybody in this team, and so that's the
Motivated
thing.
you to learn to type, didn't it?
But I mean,
And why? Because you were embarrassed to type badly in front of your peers.
well, I mean, I don't mind typing badly in front of myself, but it's not that I was embarrassed. It's just that I was holding up the entire group. I mean, if you're a slow typer and you're doing pair programming, you're impacting other people, and like I don't mind
We'll just
being
call
slow
it
myself.
necessity.
Yeah. And like if it had happened the first day I started, then yeah, that would have been embarrassment. But it was, I don't know, a month in maybe before someone said anything.
I think from what you're talking about, there really has to be a great deal of trust for
Yep,
this.
that's
to
it.
work.
Yeah, and so
Because, I mean, my first thought was, and I'm not saying this necessarily, I mean, it works for you guys and that's great, but I have worked with a lot of folks with disabilities in my work, and all I could think of is, there's no way anybody disabled could ever work in your group because you guys wouldn't tolerate it. And that just, I mean, I'm just saying, that's the first thing that popped into my head when I heard what you were talking about doing. And it's a little related to the embarrassment, not quite the same, but it was, I saw a huge barrier there. And then it occurred to me that unless there was this huge trust level, that maybe that's the issue.
Teams have to trust each other, and that's part of why you are doing a transition and you have people on the team that nobody trusts or respects.
Right.
There's a problem.
now in our situation,
There's some things you can't do with teams until you have a set of people together
Right,
who are willing to even try to trust each other.
right.
yeah,
Right.
and that is true. And in our situation, we have had issues with carpal tunnel and things like that, and so we have, it's perfectly fine to not type at the keyboard, you can still navigate and things like that. We've done, and the whole team is kind of bends over backwards to accommodate any of those things. So we do have certain situations, but it does take a lot of trust to be able to do that. And as far as like trust builders go, I don't know kind of how this happened, but people that were going on walks kind of started going on walks together, and then we started hiking together, and so we hike as a team a lot of the time, and things like that. So I think a lot of social interaction that doesn't seem forced, I guess, is really important, because that will also kind of coax people out of their hiking places. But I really think that the randories, like if you said, because kind of right away, Woody said anybody who wants to do a randori can be at the keyboard. You know, you can be in the rotation. You don't have to be in the rotation, but you all have to be there. And so the whole group started doing randoris, and that kind of, it does have like this whole example setting situation. It kind of tells people, you know, where they are, what direction you're heading in, and kind of doing suggestions beyond that point kind of leads people to.
But they all were required to be in the room when it was happening.
Yeah. So I mean, that was the thing. Is
So
like.
this is what I had to do with my team that I couldn't hire a fire.
Mm-hmm.
I had to, in a very non-agile way, tell them to do agile things.
Yeah.
To bootstrap them. Because they had no proof point. They had no experience. And so I had to say, you have to pair.
Yeah.
You have to pair 1 hour a day. Or you have to come to this learning session where I talk about word factoring it.
Yeah.
Right? Like all the informational
So
sessions.
that's the thing, is if you have a randori and the whole goal is to you know, have an example of the parent. I mean, not only does it show everybody that they can jump into the rotation, it's, you know, and somebody's likely to eventually come forward and do it. If not, just start doing a randori by yourself in front of everybody. But I really think that you kind of get this whole idea, and that, you know, there's like the center of attention, and then people eventually want to kind of be a part of that. And then eventually you may have a situation where somebody's utterly resistant to no end, so then you have to deal with that.
So I'm kind of curious, everybody is thinking about their own situations here, and,
Yeah.
and I know, having been at the mob session, that your situation is highly unique. I'm sure you know that as well. If we were to do a randori, I could tell you exactly who would sit at the keyboard, who would navigate, and how everybody else would sit around and watch every single time, and they would be perfectly content.
How's that?
They would be happy to watch somebody else do it, but they're never going to stick their hand up to do it.
I mean, well, that's the thing, though, is we had that situation. We had somebody who was completely out of, just did not want to.
Right, I'm not talking about one, I'm talking about most.
Yeah.
Right, because yes, if there's only one person who's not participating, absolutely, you know, the group dynamics pull it in. When you have 2 out of 15 participating.
Yeah. And that's often my situation in bootstrapping teams into Agile, is that I may have 1 or 2 people out of a dozen that have even tried anything ever before. And that, it's hard to bootstrap that. It's easy to get a team of 8 people, 6 of them are already into it, and 2 of them don't know what they're doing. The 2 will osmose, right? But it's, for me, that bootstrapping situation is often.
That's exactly why I stopped doing Agile introductions.
I
Just got tired of fighting.
Finding a new job, that's the one. Well, I do have an idea on that, and it would be a nice little experiment to do. Start showing people how your methods can start replacing the things that other people do every day. So if people are completely unwilling to learn, and they say, hey, I'm doing, and you know, you just call out and be like, hey, who's doing something every day that they really hate doing, and just do it endlessly, and do a randori on that. Because we did have a situation where one of our developers was just looking something up every day, and maybe 2 or 3, 4 times a day. It would take like 20 minutes of his time each day to do this lookup and to email somebody. And so I was saying, why are we doing this? Why don't we just automate it? And so that was kind of another moment where we started saving him hours per day. And you know, it was the same developer who was initially resistant. He's kind of, you know, he's submitting a talk for Agile 2013 now. So there's this whole kind of transformation that happened there. But I think just showing that you can automate things that they have completely locked themselves into, and then saying, hey, you can't do that anymore because it's completely automated. it's not it kind of forces them out of it, but it also kind of shows like, hey, this is something that you have convinced yourself that you have to spend your time every day doing this sort of thing. So now you can pull him out of that and hopefully convert them as a believer at this point. So that might be a nice experiment.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I guess that's part of our culture already. We don't do repetitive tasks. So everything we do is something new. Otherwise, we've already automated it to the extent practical. I guess for the rest of you who are managers too, I'm curious if you've seen this. So I've been a manager at a number of different companies, mid-sized and smaller. The one thing I can always count on is I never spend my training budget. Never, ever, ever. I have free books, free training, free conferences. Tell people to do it, make it part of their performance plan. Always have the bulk of the money left over. Is that unusual?
Yeah, at least in my experience. I ran out fast.
Yeah, that's unusual.
I'm in the same boat as you. I can't get people to sign up for stuff if they want to or not.
Yeah, this is not just one company. I mean, this is.
You can start sending it over to us because we.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the places where there has been a budget, I think it's gotten used. I've worked in places where we've had no budget.
Right.
At least on hotel rooms.
Yeah, I mean, free trip to a conference. I mean, it's not even like you have to report when you get back. Just go.
Yeah.
Did you ask why people are not
Oh,
going?
they have 1,000 different reasons. Not time, too much work, have to take
Yeah,
care of the kids.
we didn't have a fiscal budget for professional development at my last place, but we did have a certain amount of time that was supposed to be dedicated to exploratory projects, and most of the time it was that people didn't feel empowered to get away from their normal
Right.
grind.
Right.
Siloing
To
then,
do
that
that.
might be the problem. Siloing, is that kind of the situation they're facing?
Well, that, in order for me to use, when I was working on salary, for me to use my own training budget, I always had to work double time before I left and double time when I came back,
Right.
because I took time off to train on something. Now, I learned stuff, but it was like going on vacation. It's unheard of. You're working horrible hours before you leave and horrible hours after you come back, every time you're not at work, whether it's for training or whatever. But if you're not at work, you're still required to do the work that you didn't do when you weren't there.
But if you have a team, and one person's gone for a few days, the team should, it's fine. I mean, just like someone has a cold and they're home.
Well,
But
that's
I think that is
different.
one of people's aversions to learning, is that
Yeah.
I don't have time. Like, for
Right.
example, I'm here at this conference, I'm running back and forth for maybe a couple calls,
Right.
a couple times over
Right.
the 3-day period, but for the most part, they're like, we value you wanting to go and learn more about
Right.
this. So they're letting me go to the conference, and so it's kind of sending a message
Right.
that,
Yeah. I think that's
You know.
part of it is that
Yeah.
maybe the managers of those people and getting key people to actually go on those and then have something kind of promoted out of that, like, hey, it was really cool that you went
I've been
back.
leading, for example, my entire professional career, and there are people, like, you can't convince, there are people who won't read a technical book.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the difference. I have learned over the time period that there are people who will want to learn and people who don't.
Yeah.
And whether you can change between one and the other, I don't know, because I only see them for a short period of their lifetime.
I've worked with people who can't, I've worked with people who started out in a place where they were not interested in learning about anything. They didn't know about those guys who would only use Microsoft products. It wasn't because of the company
Yeah.
ran a product made on Linux. This team literally, like, it's Microsoft, if I can't call Microsoft, I'm not using it. And now, like, one of the guys learned Linux, he seeks out open source stuff, he learned new languages, he's learned new frameworks, total turnaround. Now, not all of them ended up there, but certainly many of them did. But they sort of had to be given a big fat kick in the butt, and then a bunch of pushes, and a bunch of structured exercises, until they sort of were able to seek things out on their own.
Right.
Like, they didn't even know how to take the first half a step.
it's important to tie it back to their performance of their individual learning plans. Like, what do you want to do this year? What's next year you look like that isn't here this year? And then they get excited about it, you're supporting it.
I wish.
Maybe.
Yeah. No, we've been down.
We have
People are penalized for the fact that they didn't, and it's really just been verbal, right? I don't do formal public reviews anymore, but you talk to people and say, what do you want to learn? I want to learn X. Okay, what are you going to do to learn that? I'm going to do this next week. You have your one-on-one. Did you do that? No. Next week, so how are you going to do it next week? They don't really want to learn it. They're just trying to get through the one-on-one. That's really what they're trying to do.
Have one-on-ones more frequent.
Could I give people
Every time it doesn't
Part
happen.
of their work, like part of their work in the sprint, people get, sort of, they have to install something they never installed before, learn something that they never learned before, not in addition to their work, but as part of their work. And then if they don't do it, their whole team fails. So there's something they gotta step up.
So,
And like you built learning into the day.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is every day we spend an hour doing that. And I believe that an hour is not enough, and Woody believes that an hour is not enough, and so, but we don't want to overstep our bounds at this point. But I think that we probably will eventually get to that point where we have more than an hour each day to do this learning. And not only that, but for many members in the team, they're learning something. It's, one person might specialize in databases, one person might specialize in web technologies. They bounce off of each other constantly, and they learn something from each other. And so they're like, no one's going to be an expert in everything. And so everybody's learning throughout the day, but we also get a dedicated learning period where we're trying to improve the things that we do. And so it has snowballed into this.
I don't know what it is. I know it's good enough that I can sort of keep up, and I can look at the screen while I'm typing instead of looking at the
He's doing
keyboard.
a lot.